Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup. I know you haven't seen a ton of me in recent weeks. For those that don't know, I'm writing a book, and the deadline to submit it to the publisher is this week. And I have been up all hours of the day and early morning trying to finish this book on the Flint water crisis and cover up. The good news is I am almost done. The better news is I think that this book, which will be out next year, will be really, really important. And that is why I am really, really disturbed and sad to report the news from yesterday that the Attorney General of Michigan, Dana Nessel, and her office have announced that they are ending their investigation and prosecution into the Flint water crisis, which means after nearly a decade, April next year, not one government official that is responsible for the poisoning of a community of 100,000 people will ever see a jury trial, most likely, and will ever be convicted. Let me repeat that. With the end of the Attorney General's Flint investigation and prosecution, it is very likely no one will ever see behind bars for the mass poisoning of an entire American city. For those of you that don't know the story, and I don't have enough time to go through the entire story, there was an investigation that launched in 2016 into the Flint water crisis. The Attorney General at the time was a Republican, Bill Schuette. He appointed a special prosecutor outside of the Attorney General's office in Michigan to prosecute the case. That prosecutor, Todd Flood, and his team charged 15 state of Michigan and city of Flint officials with serious crimes, everything from involuntary manslaughter to misconduct in office to neglect of duty to financial fraud. And in 2019, when the current Attorney General, a Democrat, Dana Nessel, actually before she got into office, she started publicly criticizing the investigation, even though she had no information, no access to, private legal discovery, no evidence. She had no private back route, behind the scenes intel into what they had found in terms of evidence against state officials, what they were doing. Based on my reporting, that investigation was building a case against former Governor Rick Snyder for involuntary manslaughter. Let me repeat, they were building a case against the former governor of Michigan for involuntary manslaughter. When Attorney General Nessel got elected, she fired the special prosecutor, most of the entire team that worked with him, and basically restarted the entire investigation from scratch, citing they missed evidence or they failed to secure all the evidence. She never provided any evidence for that claim. I found out later in my reporting that it's most likely that she fired the special prosecutor out of just political pettiness because she didn't like him for whatever reason. Or because he was appointed under a Republican Attorney General, her predecessor, and perhaps she wanted to restart it under her purview so she could take the credit. So she fired the special prosecutor who was building a case against the former governor for involuntary manslaughter. She also was handed a serious financial case from the team that she fired, a racketeering case. Think of like The Sopranos or these, Italian mob movies or shows. Racketeering. RICO cases were started in the 1970s to go after organized crime, i.e. the mafia. The original Flint prosecution that the current Attorney General fired, they were close to filing racketeering charges for financial fraud, the financial fraud that led to the water crisis. In a nutshell, without going into the whole explanation, the reason Flint was even using its polluted Flint River in the first place, it was supposed to be temporary because a brand new water pipeline was being built called the Karagandhi Water Authority, or the KWA. And essentially, Flint was nearly bankrupt and had no business joining a new water system, much less borrowing $100 million to help finance the construction of that pipeline. Alleged financial fraud was the reason Flint was able to borrow $100 million, even though it was at its legal borrowing limit. So after the current Attorney General, Dana Nessel, fired the previous team, after the current Attorney General Nessel appointed new prosecutors, one of whom had never faced a jury trial before, she then dropped all of the charges they had filed. A year and a half later, she recharged many of the officials that she had just dropped charges for. And then a year or so later, the Michigan Supreme Court tossed out the new charges that the Attorney General's office filed, citing that they violated the state of Michigan's Constitution by issuing the indictments against Rick Snyder, the former governor, and others, by using a one-man grand jury, which is a secretive process behind closed doors, where a one-man grand jury, i.e. a judge, rules and issues the indictments. In a 6-0 Michigan Supreme Court decision, they ruled that that violated the state constitution to bring the charges using a one-man grand jury. They also, a separate judge ruled that Nessel's prosecutors made other serious errors. Nessel's prosecutors appealed to the state Supreme Court to reinstate the charges that the Supreme Court tossed. The Supreme Court last month refused to hear their appeal, and then yesterday refused to hear the appeal on the dismissal of charges against former Governor Rick Snyder. And that is when the current Attorney General, Dana Nessel, and her team announced they were ending their Flint water prosecution. I'll read you just a little bit of this. Attorney General Dana Nessel's office is ending its pursuit of criminal prosecutions over the Flint water crisis after 7 years of no convictions, a decision that came Tuesday after the Michigan Supreme Court rejected an attempt to revive charges against Republican former Governor Rick Snyder. The Flint prosecution team of the Democratic Attorney General, led by Chief Deputy Attorney General Fadwa Hammoud and Wayne County Prosecutor Kim Worthy, said the Flint water cases are now closed. Snyder, whose administration appointed the emergency city managers who oversaw Flint's change of water sources and the subsequent lead contamination, said he was encouraged, I'm sure he was, by the Supreme Court decision. Hammoud and Worthy said Tuesday they will release a, quote, full and thorough report on the office's prosecutorial efforts next year. Oh, wonderful that we'll get a report. It's unclear what could be made public since Hammoud and Worthy's use of a one-man grand jury put strict limits on what evidence can be released from the investigation. Their quote, our disappointment in the Michigan Supreme Court is exceeded only by our sorrow for the people of Flint. The Supreme Court's decisions in the case are heartbreaking and have been based on procedural flaws and not on the actual merits of the prosecution, they said. Quote, if a jury decided that the defendants were not guilty of the charged offenses, so be it. To deny the opportunity to present the evidence and to let the victims tell their story is truly heartbreaking. I'll tell you what's truly heartbreaking. What's truly heartbreaking, and I've been to Flint almost 20 times. My next trip will be my 20th. I've spent 8 years covering this story. I'm writing a book, like I said, on what I've discovered, which in my mind and based on my reporting is the biggest government cover-up of the 21st century. Let me repeat. This is the biggest government cover-up of the 21st century. The Flint water cover-up, honestly, makes Watergate look like child's play. This is much, much worse and more corrupt than Watergate or any of the government cover-ups that the mainstream media pretends are the most sinister. What's heartbreaking is a new attorney general came in several years ago, and for no actual legitimate reason, sabotaged, let me repeat, sabotaged an ongoing criminal investigation that was making progress to hold government officials who failed to act, who knowingly chose not to act, who knowingly chose not to alert the public, not to alert Flint residents when they knew those people were drinking and bathing in contaminated, poisonous water. There was an investigation going on that was going after those people who knowingly allowed poor, impoverished, majority Black people to drink poisonous water for 18 months. It's actually been longer than 18 months, but technically Flint used the Flint River for 18 months. They had already successfully gotten 2 Michigan judges to bound over, meaning to rule that the state health department director, Nick Lyon, who was Governor Snyder's health director, a judge ruled that he would have to face a trial for involuntary manslaughter for his alleged failures to notify Flint residents about Legionnaires, the deadly bacteria that killed a lot of Flint residents, a waterborne bacteria that came as a result of the Flint River switch. Nick Lyon, the health director, he was but soon going to trial as a result of the prosecution that Dana Nessel got rid of. Another top health official was going to jury trial after a judge ruled she would have to face jury trial for involuntary manslaughter. What's heartbreaking is a set of prosecutors and investigators had built a case that in football terms was near the end zone to charge state and city officials with financial racketeering for concocting a fraudulent financial scheme to saddle Flint with over $100 million in debt to unnecessarily join and pay for a brand new privatized water system. This attorney general fired that team and then never pursued those financial charges. That's heartbreaking. Let me read some comments from people in Flint responding to this grave miscarriage injustice. This is former Flint Mayor Karen Weaver, who was the mayor during the early and worst years of the water crisis. Quote, "We are not surprised, but we should be. We should be outraged. What have we as a people come to when these are the things that happen? We are not a disposable people, but apparently to so many we are. If they will do this to Flint under a national spotlight, then you better watch out everywhere else." Flint resident Vicky Marks, who developed Parkinson's after drinking the water in Flint. Her doctor said it could be from heavy metal poisoning, lead. Quote, "I'm not surprised. As far as I'm concerned, she," talking about Attorney General Nessel, "was never going to pursue the criminals who poisoned us. She lied to us before she was even elected. She's just another piece of shit politician who doesn't care about the 99%. Her worthless Worthy," that was one of the prosecutors, "and Hamoud should be charged for impersonating human beings." Flint Councilman Eric Mays, "I thought it was ridiculous. I think they should have kept Todd Flood in as the special prosecutor. They never should have dropped all of that work. You don't just come in and get rid of that kind of work and gamble and start over. I was always suspicious." He was referring to them coming in and firing the special prosecutor, Todd Flood, dropping all of the charges and starting from scratch. This is from the former chief investigator who the current attorney general fired. This man, Andy Arena, helped bring down the Gambino crime family in New York. He was the former head of the FBI's Detroit office, and the attorney general fired him when she came in. And based on my reporting, they didn't even really do a thorough debrief with the chief investigator of the Flint water investigation on what he had found. Arena said, quote, "The people of Flint got no justice once again. At the end of all of this, they are left hanging." Can you imagine for a second? Just imagine. For any reason, if somebody harmed your child, if somebody harmed your mother or father, if a government official harmed your child, if a government official harmed your mother or your father or your brother or your sister or your fill in the blank, if a government official knowingly allowed them to be harmed, whether by water or some other contaminant, and then through legal maneuvers, legal incompetence, petty politics, arrogance, corruption, that the official that is elected to be the chief justice officer in your state, the attorney general, helped allow the people who harmed your loved ones, in many cases permanently, children with permanent brain damage from lead, children with permanent special needs, permanent learning disabilities, who will never, ever reach their full potential. Middle-aged people, not elderly people, who have developed rare forms of cancer and died in their 40s and their 50s and their 60s. Flint now is one of the highest and fastest growing cancer clusters in America. I wonder why so many people in Flint have cancer. Could it have anything to do with the lead that causes cancer, or the carcinogenic TTHMs that were in their water? TTHMs are a byproduct of a disinfectant byproduct of chlorine, and were found in Flint's water. People who died of Legionnaires and pneumonia from Flint's water. Can you imagine if you lost a loved one or a friend, and the people who knowingly allowed it to happen did not notify the residents, did not put out a health alert, stop drinking the water? For 2 years, the Snyder administration knew in 2014 and didn't alert the public about lead for a year and a half, and about Legionnaires, the deadly bacteria, for almost 2 years. Can you imagine if they got off scot-free? And your attorney general was blaming the state Supreme Court rather than herself? Attorney General Dana Nessel should immediately resign from office. And I spoke with 2 lawyers yesterday who told me they have never in their long career seen anything like this, where such a high-profile major case, to have an attorney general come in, fire the prosecutors, fire the investigators, start from scratch, drop the charges, then recharge many of the same people you dropped the charges against, and then get the cases thrown out due to your incompetence. One of them even said, it seems that it could have been intentional sabotage. This is not a time to promote my book, but a lot of these details will be in my book that will come out next year. And I have a deadline of Friday to get it to the publisher. We'll have a lot more on this, but I will end with what Martin Luther King wrote from jail in Birmingham. Justice too long delayed is justice denied. Today is day 3,477 of the Flint water crisis. And no one will be going to prison for it.